What's the most business impacting thing?
Mm-hmm.
And if it's a certain process, even in your office, maybe you need to say what are the possible vulnerabilities tied to that process.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And the
Okay.
people, your people are assets.
Right.
You know, I mean, when you're just not looking at, you're looking at people and what they can bring to your business. And not everybody comes into the business prepared to do the roles that they probably didn't train for, or they did not expect, or you didn't expect them to kind of fall into that. So that really, and I think that's what I like about this team here is everybody that we have brings something that you can grasp onto, and you can be like, wow, now that makes a lot more sense. Now that I can understand why this guy to my left does what he does and this guy to my right does what he does, and I'm this person in the middle that we all complement. Every business has that.
Out west where the sun always beams bright, Midland skies keep the hustle in sight. BAM Consultants got the blueprint intact. For dreamers on the grind, they got your back. Championing dreams from the ground to supreme, providing that spark, igniting the team. Marketing flow strategies that glean. BAM in Midland, building your dream.
Bam. Here we go. That entrance, man, every time.
Mm-hmm.
So, hey, we got a great episode today, man. Thank you guys for coming. I'm sitting here today with Tall City Cyber. It's the business development team here. So I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves.
Okay, my name is Eric Etheridge. I actually live in Lubbock and started working for Gina in Tall City Cyber back in the middle of January.
Cool.
My name is Chris Tovar, and I've been with them with Tall City for a little while. Probably not about the same time, but I'm from Odessa. So,
cool deal.
All right, my name's Eric Waller. I've been around the block or two, but lived in Permian Basin probably last 30 years, and business development rep, just like everyone.
all the same.
Yeah. Around the block
right.
once or twice. Huh?
Yeah, I was born in Michigan, raised in West Texas, and went to college in Kentucky. So
Okay. Yeah.
that's what I mean there. Yeah.
Nice. Well,
Yeah, for sure.
interesting. You know, we're gonna have a really good conversation here. We're talking about cybersecurity.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a word that I think is becoming more people are starting to understand instead of a word that's like what. Because just of the emerging technology that's coming on, the inflow, things that are happening, right? Because at one point, we thought that Bitcoin was impenetrable, and then all of a sudden we have that hack a couple years back. So people start to, hey, and then, it doesn't happen to me.
For sure. Yeah.
But then, hey, a buddy of mine, had his ID stolen, started with his credit card, and then city governments, colleges get hacked, and it just halts. It halts everything.
Yeah.
And so there's real consequences that can be avoided. And I think that's what we're here today to talk about all of that, right? Completely from the ground up. I've heard this before that the most important facet that anybody has from preventing something like that is the person, the user themselves, right? Because you can have fancy software.
Mm-hmm.
And
It starts with the person.
It starts with the person.
Starts with the person, and that's a very fundamental.
Yes.
You think it doesn't have to be complex. The fundamental aspect is what people know how, and that's really why I'm happy to be here. Is as I started that, I got off of social media. I have zero social media.
wow.
I have zero because I was once a victim. And it cost me $500, and it's one of those things that you don't ever think it's going to happen to you.
Right.
And I've always been one of those guys that has little side hustles and side jobs. And I've always been, we were talking about just a few minutes ago, I've always been in school, and I've always had time to kind of, feel. And I got caught into a scam on an email at UTPB when I was going back to school.
Oh, wow.
And I thought it was a legit email. I thought this professor was looking for, a work study, to kind of go through and help him. And sure enough, it ended up being a scam, and it cost me $2,500. And I don't want to get into all of it because it's something that I absolutely felt, man, I need to step up my game as a person, as an individual that's on my cell phone, checking emails, because that's really where it all begins is push of a button. Once you push that button.
But the lesson's there, right? Because you realize that it was you
Oh,
who hit
man.
that button, right?
Invasion.
Yeah.
And outside of embarrassment, the invasion is it's almost like getting robbed. It's almost
Yeah.
like,
No, you
you
did
know,
get
so, I
robbed.
mean,
You
yeah,
got
for
robbed.
sure, for sure.
Yeah.
Just not in a
Yeah.
physical sense.
Right.
But I
Yeah.
think that's really why it made me, in my mind, trigger, man, you've got to dig yourself into this. And so before it starting at Tall City, I was already doing that, you know, and I was looking at terms that I've never, computer science, you're going to get all of that information. But in business, I started learning about that from internal controls. What are they doing? And so I really thought, and you would be surprised on how much you already know. You just don't realize that it's there.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But for me, it just started for me. So this opportunity to just give back and kind of grow in that same sense, it made a lot of sense for me to join. It really did.
Well, that's a good story that you have, because you're trying, and that's what we're trying to do here at Tall City Cyber is trying to get the mindset of getting people ahead of the game
Yeah.
Yes.
instead of trying to.
Wait till it happens,
Yes,
and then
yes.
yeah, you're already behind the eight ball.
And the
Yeah.
thing is too, not an effort to scare anybody, but it's just a thought that people need to have in the back of their minds, whether you're an individual or you work for a certain entity or you own your own business or whatever, is that it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
Right.
And so you have to be prepared. So there are certain things that there's experience that we have at Tall City Cyber that we can actually recognize things that maybe lead up to a possible issue down the road. So we can kind of help guide you in your path to say, here's some things, like you said, internal controls that we can put in place, and certain things we can mitigate those risks.
Yeah.
Now, you can't do away with the risk completely, but you can get it down to an acceptable level for you as a person or you as a company, even to say we can live with that. And that's the goal of cybersecurity in general, is to try to minimize that risk as much as possible down to an acceptable level.
Yeah.
So, in my experiences too, and I mean, I've been involved in ransomware, incident response. I've gone into places before where you got a lot of cooperation from everybody, including the person that clicked on the link. And I've been in other environments where I've walked in and no cooperation. So that's the difference in styles and approaches, because you're saying, what did y'all do to try to prevent this? Or did you have anything in place? Did this person violate policy? Oh, we don't have any policies for that. Okay, that's step one.
Right.
You know, let's back up. Let's see and we can work forward from there. And it's eye-opening to see that there's all these different entities, and it's not just the city of Odessa. It's not just the Health Sciences Center in Lubbock and El Paso. It's Don's Muffler Shop down the way. If they've got more than one branch, more than one garage, because they're all interconnected.
Yeah.
And so that puts them at risk. So I think that's the main thing, is trying to get the word out to say, our goal is to help you minimize your risk to an acceptable level.
You know what's funny? It's when we were discussing all of this and I was kind of going back and looking at facts, it's probably the one mind-blowing thing that I found was nothing is decreasing. Everything is increasing from attacks and every vector, every single vector. And it's large percentages.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, we had a drop in, ransom attacks. It is like skyrocketing in the amount from 2019 to, 2025. It would blow your mind if you saw the amount. It's how quickly it happens. I mean, I think the minimum amount, when I was looking at this, and this is going back to the small businesses probably don't have as much cash flow. They don't have as much savings. They don't have a whole lot of wiggle room to be able to say, well, we can bounce back from an attack. It's $200,000. That's the minimum amount.
Wow.
So could you imagine having your business threatened with ransomware, and you know that you can't pay it, or you know that you don't have that opportunity? It'd be catastrophic for something that you've been building. And there's a lot of people that put their businesses into, that's their blood, sweat, and tears.
Yeah.
And then for somebody, like you were saying, just to hit a button that causes your business to that's a lot of pressure on people.
It's huge.
And in my opinion, it's like every time I go to work, it's like, okay, take a deep breath. Let me check my emails. You start to scan it.
Yes.
And you start to see, and that's what people don't have, is they
Right.
don't have the ability to look at the domain, the sender, and say, well, that doesn't look right.
Doesn't
Or
look
that
right.
email. Yeah.
Right.
There's just so many little
and
things.
the volume, yes, I can totally comprehend the volume, right? Because emergent technology, right? AI is going to allow, the bad actors to step up the game.
Yep.
Not just in volume though, but in sophistication.
Oh, man.
Right?
Absolutely.
Like to now they're almost mimicking like a well-known company.
to
More
the
people
point.
are a professor, right?
Yeah.
Like they're mimicking a professor.
Yeah.
and they're
Like it's a
Christianizing.
worker there. So
Yeah. That's and that is something that how do we
Yeah.
set policy? How do we set practices in place? What are those practices now, and how are those practices changing due to AI?
Yeah.
What are you guys seeing out there that you recommend?
From a standpoint of just, taking it, going back to down the foundation level, you have to look at it again from the risk standpoint. And you have to look at it from a, what can you train your people to be able to recognize? Now, if it's, Joe in accounting, is he going to be as apt to always check those emails like he should? Short answer is probably by the time Friday rolls around,
Yeah.
he's not looking at it as closely. And that's not a fault of Joe. That's just a fault of
human nature.
The daily grind. Yeah.
Now, if thing is too is like people say, well, cybersecurity, the IT department should send me an email. Well, there's a thing called email fatigue. I mean,
It's a real thing.
Yeah.
it's a huge because then if every time you says, well, double check, whatever, and they see that every day, they get kind of disheartened. They kind of feel like, well, I'm not being trusted by my own employer, which is not the case. But it's like it is. Human nature is to be, and inquisitive and say, what does this mean? What is this email? And I'll give an example. Like a few weeks ago, we were talking about something, and I think it was Waller who got an email that was a phishing attempt.
I remember that. Yeah.
And we kind of joked about it, and I said, it was supposed to be from Gina, right? No,
Blake.
or
we had one from Gina. I had one from Gina several months ago.
And then you got
supposedly
another one,
Gina.
right? Yeah.
Wow. And then one from supposedly Blake, who
it was one of our engineers.
Yes.
And so it's funny because it's like, I said, I kind of jokingly, but it was kind of half serious too. I said, now if they ask you to go get gift cards, that's an indicator that it's not legitimate. But it goes back to the whole thing too of starting on a foundational level, but trying to think, what is the most risky thing that I do on a daily basis? Well, for some people, it is just answering or opening up emails and clicking on things. Some other people, it could be, something tied to their job that maybe, especially like in the oil field, the riskiest thing they do is every single day. It's the threat is always there.
Yeah.
Oh, you're right. It's
And
it's seen. It's palpable.
Yeah.
Right.
And whereas the difference in cybersecurity is it's not always
It's
seen.
silent
And again, like you said,
invisible.
like you were pointing out a while ago, the attacks are increasing. But here's my take on that too is I think it's just because we're more aware. And organizations are definitely more aware
Absolutely.
that something's going on. And
surface is all of that, right?
one of my most recent employers, we were sitting there one day and I was in charge of vulnerability management. And I got a message from one of my fellow engineers. He said, "Are you scanning the honeypot?" I was like, "No." He goes, "Okay, there's some shenanigans going on."
What's a honeypot?
A honeypot is like a disguise system to kind of lure attackers in. So there's not anything. There's no legitimate data there.
Okay.
And so it's kind of cordoned off.
Now you just exposed the honeypot there, Waller.
Yeah.
Now
Sorry
I gotta
about
change
that.
the name.
But anyway,
We'll edit that later.
no, Angel, leave it in.
Please leave it in.
But I was like, no, I'm not scanning it right now. So anyway, and I hadn't been for like we kind of did on a regular basis, but I usually did it like once a quarter. I said, no, I'm not doing it. So he said, yeah, something's going on. So we started searching. Well, we had a contractor who's actually based in Pakistan, and he was on vacation, but someone had gotten in his computer and found his password and all. Before we know it, this person is actually scanning our environment. And we were like talking about, okay, maybe, is a policy about who we have as contractors.
Yeah.
And, should we do a little bit more vetting before we bring those people on board?
So you look at it this way. This is the way that I look at it from my point of view, because background is healthcare. You got vulnerable people. You've got people that have, things that are out of their control, right? Then you have cybersecurity, which is another vulnerability, but it comes from the devices that we depend on. And I think that right there in itself is really what got me connected. Was for 20 years, I was doing what I could from knowledge base to help people overcome certain addictions, smoking, because I'm a respiratory therapist and I still carry my license and everything, but I can link those two together because you're looking at it from a sense of now health records there's a price for health records. The HIPAA, and it trains us to be protective of all of this. And I think that's one of the things that I correlated is I look at it very similar because, man, you can really affect somebody's life. Right. And I think that that's what I hope to keep Bringing those points together is using that knowledge to explain how cybersecurity works, but protecting them from a different standpoint.
BAM! Welcome to the BAM BizTalk podcast, where we cut through the fluff and dive straight into the real-world wins and lessons of entrepreneurship. This isn't just another podcast. It's your toolkit for building and learning what it really takes to grow and thrive in business as well as in life. I'm your humbly eccentric host, Angel Garcia, co-founder and CEO of BAM Entrepreneurial Center, and I'm here to pull back the curtain on the strategies, hacks, and habits of successful business owners who've been in the trenches. Each week, we'll bring you unfiltered stories from entrepreneurs who have been there, done that, and lived to tell the tale. We'll uncover the moments that shape their businesses, the wins, the stumbles, and the lessons they learned the hard way so you don't have to. It's about real talk, actionable insights, and practical strategies to help you go from where you are to where you want to be. So, if you're hungry for inspiration, thirsty for knowledge, and ready to make moves, you've found your tribe. So let's dive in, get real, and build something extraordinary. You're now tuned in to the BAM BizTalk podcast, the playbook for the bold.
Right, because HIPAA, in the health field industry, you are trained HIPAA,
Yeah.
right? It's like crucial.
It's
every
just
single
forced on
healthcare
you.
worker. Right.
Absolutely. It's a
Right. Whereas in the rest of the
voluntary-
world,
Yeah.
maybe certain fields like accountants, people with sensitive information, they have certain
Yeah.
regulatory, guidelines and policies they go by. But the rest of us business owners, it's still the wild, wild west.
Like, good way to look at it.
We're just kind of, it's because everything has a cost. All right. And we're like, I could probably handle that. Oh, that's a lot. That's going to hurt the bottom line. You know what? Maybe next year. Maybe we're doing a little better. We'll look at next year because we haven't hit yet. So we're playing this game of chicken.
Yeah, no, it's also kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Yes.
Because you're saying, well, I've got this current issue that I know I got to deal with, but the unknown I can kind of put off. And it's kind of like buying insurance.
I was just about to say
Because you're saying to
the
yourself,
unknown, you don't know.
Yeah.
if you're saying, well, I'm going to just go buy more cyber liability insurance.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's fine. That is a way to mitigate your risk. Yeah. But you're transferring that risk.
Yeah.
And you still own the risk, but you're just passing it off to farmers or State Farm or somebody like that. Whereas if you're always taking part in risky type of endeavors, just take your car insurance, for example. Say you're going off and you're drag racing every weekend. You're taking it beyond the risk of a normal person.
Normal driving.
And so when you're a business owner, though, and you're buying cyber liability insurance, and you're saying, well, we have so many records that we need to maintain and for the sake of our business, and maybe it's for client records. And maybe those have a different regulatory responsibility or requirement.
Right.
You may say, well, I'm going to just enhance my cyber liability insurance. Well, that doesn't remove you from the need to actually have some controls built in to say, well, let's try to mitigate this risk a little further. So that way, we have so many records archived. Well, guess what? Your cyber liability insurance carrier is going to say, how many of those do you have archived?
Because they don't exactly.
Because they're going to set your premium based on the total number of records,
have, yeah.
not what you actually have on your computer at the time. They may say, well, do you have any of this and cloud backup?
Yeah.
Or do you have this someplace else? They're going to want to know that.
And there's an ROI tied to everything that it's just like our lives. There's an ROI. What is the ROI on insurance? Well, you're not going to go out and do things just to get paid. You're not going to go. It's a fine life balance. Now it's something that affects your life, and you're absolutely right, because when you carry insurance, you're carrying it for the what ifs, the unknowns. You don't know these things. You look at it in a sense that when you have such a valuable, priceless what you are, you can't replace you. There's certain things that you can adjust and maintain and have a good life. It's just one of those ideas that an everyday walking gauntlet. When the moment that you look at your cell phone, the moment that you log onto your computer, whether it's personal, whether it's work, you're asked, do you have a protection? Do you have this? So it's out there.
Mm-hmm.
It's available. And I think with it being such a digital reality, it has to be on the forefront of everybody's mind. To me, it just makes more sense to know about it and say, well, I've given the choice either as a personal or a business to do something about it. Mm-hmm. The ROI is, what is the return on that investment if I invest in that? Well, it's no different than insurance. What is the return on investment if you don't take care of yourself?
Right.
Right? To me, it's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
You have to look at the risk versus benefit. And man, let me tell you, the risks.
Yeah.
And if I can see it, then I'm all about learning about it. And you see it every day. Now, you don't even have to turn on the news because you can be in CBS and you can hear somebody talking about it. So
What
it's
would you
prevalent.
say? Sorry, Kristen.
No,
You're
sorry.
good. I was just thinking maybe for Eric, what would you say, like, as far as Tall City Cyber goes, or any security agency like ours, would be, what we're talking about business and everything, a medium-sized business comes in. What would be the minimal type of thing that we could do to really kind of not only show them the vulnerabilities, but also,
Support.
start them out?
Yeah.
I would
Anyway.
say probably the initial step would
Like, would
probably
that
be to see if they've had a risk assessment done.
That involve pen testing, penetration testing?
No, that would actually be like a sit down discussion with
Okay.
what kind of controls they have in place.
What do
talk
they
about
do now?
What's your most critical data?
Yeah.
Where is it stored?
Yeah.
How's it stored? Because that's just as important, because they say, well, we have it on these self-encrypting hard drives over here,
Mm-hmm.
and we only have the keys to that, and those are in that safe over there.
Yeah.
And we have backups that in a safe
Yeah.
deposit. Well, you're taking measures to take care of those things. So the first thing is, I'd say, have you had a risk assessment done?
Mhm.
If they say, yeah, well, how long ago was it? Oh, it was 10 years ago.
Assets really is
you
what you're
need
looking at,
you
right?
need another one, and you
Yeah.
probably need to look at your systems, your processes, your data. Your
Yeah.
data is the main thing, because that's what the currency is for the threat actors.
Sure.
Because even though years ago I worked for a place where the data of the people we were keeping track of is for people that were in bankruptcy, and somebody said, well, why would somebody want this data? And I said, okay, it doesn't matter. Data is data. And the threat actors out there, they don't care what it is. They want to, they can exchange that data for something they really want, because they say, look, I've got 40,000 records of people, I don't know what it is, but here it is. It's got credit card numbers and loan numbers and things like bank records and all that. Here you go. What can I get for it?
Yeah.
So that's what they're doing on the black market, and the back side of that is they're saying, what can we do with that?
Mhm.
So again, going back to the initial question Eric was asking, I would say, when was your risk assessment done?
Mm-hmm.
If they say, I never had one,
Yeah.
that's the first step.
That's the
Yeah.
first.
And if they say, well, we had one about 3 years ago, well, let's do like an update.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go through and look at all your stuff. Let's, start there and like move ourselves forward. Do you have any policies? Let's review your policies. Do you have an acceptable use policy for your employees and your users? No, we don't. That's the next step. Do you have beyond the policies, what kind of procedures do you have in place that if there was an incident,
Yeah.
how would you respond? I don't know. Okay, let's sit down and do that for you.
Yeah.
And let's take it from, let's go back to square one and get you to where we are now, to where we can say, do you feel comfortable accepting this risk now? If they say yes, that's part of it. But then you have to also be diligent and say, well, it's a continuous improvement, continuous monitoring type of thing that you have to maintain.
So governance, risk, and compliance is really where you want to start foundationally, and then just kind of build into that, right? So, and I agree with you, because I was, just understanding some people, they buy it and they put it into practice, or they put it into their asset inventory, but they don't label it. They don't have anything to protect it. And you're absolutely right, because that's what the operations are focused on, is what that asset and how it does in terms of returning that investment for them. So
And I would
it's a
think,
good point, Eric. I mean, that's nice to see that foundation of risk.
I would think that having it, starting that off, right? But then there's that physical side of training, right? The awareness, putting it into the practice is another story in itself, right?
Well, and that's a key thing, where you have to, like, again, it has to be on a regular basis. You can't just do it once a year and just let it go.
Right.
Yeah.
But it has to be something where the end result, the ending people on that side don't always feel like it's just a fatigue type of thing, where they are getting messages.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, this is our weekly message
Every
from
day.
IT about, watching what we click on or doing it, and they become complacent.
Yeah.
And so I think you have to think of more creative ways. And I know we heard something last night at the mixer for
Founders.
yeah, thank you. Somebody said something about, they did a phishing attempt with their company, and they said they picked out 1,000 employees out of 7,000, and they kind of gave them an incentive. If you do the right things, you're going to get a gift card. I don't think as much as like $25, but You know, some people,
Yeah.
hey,
It's an incentive. Yeah.
they spent $25,000
Yeah.
just, on the hopeful side that people would do the right thing. And they said that actually they did a lot better than what they'd anticipated. So I think there's people out there that are ready that want to do the right thing.
Yeah.
It's just sometimes they don't know what that is.
Right.
And so you have to lay that out, and you have to
Very
put it in
true.
policy, you have to put it in procedure,
Yeah.
and you have to make it a practice. It has to be from the top down.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't expect Joe in a county or somebody else to just,
Take ownership of
right.
It's got to be everybody.
But
Yeah.
again, an accountant probably is going to be a little bit more aware of those kinds of risks, and they're going to be more, like I say, the controls, et cetera. But, somebody else in another department,
Yeah.
they may not know. Or somebody that's on the front line, say you're working in a distribution type of facility. The people that are loading those trucks, that's not on the forefront of their minds.
Right.
So,
And I think your role-based access too plays a huge part of that. What access do you need
Right.
as a company
Right.
employee? I mean, you don't want to give the same access to everybody. You
Right.
kind of want to do it role-based, or you kind of want to make sure that everybody understands that Waller's going to have this job. He's going to have access to this certain, organizational files or passwords. So role-based definitely plays a huge part in how even a small business, not everybody needs to know the financial
Right.
side of how the business is doing, or,
Right.
supply chain is another thing. I think the pandemic was a huge eye-opener, because now everything was it's international. And so now there are places that you'll never step foot on that are controlling how your supply chain
Right.
and how that's, kind of flowing back into your business. And so that role-based component of making sure that everybody has just what they need, that's what businesses are going to. And working at the university, even at college, they have those little emails that they send you that are test emails to see if you open up the domain and see, is it the right domain? I mean, they have those little system-wide, practice for employees. And you're right. I mean, I think that it's just getting something that fits your business, but the access not everybody needs the same access. It's probably where,
The best threat actor or the best hacker is going to stay in your system, because we're talking about what happens if we find out that you've been hacked into the system. But the best one's just going to hang in there, use the data as long as they can.
Yeah.
And you're not going to know, right? But there's a story about was on a webinar yesterday where a man said he had a friend that was in a medium-sized kind of a national trucking business. And and there was an IT guy there that said, I think we probably need to start. There's some issues going on. We haven't had, as Eric mentioned before, we haven't had a real look at our system in a while. We need to do that. The CIO, I think Chief Information Officer, just kind of put it off until one day there's a couple black suits from the FBI that came in. Said because this trucking company worked pretty closely with the federal government. And so they came in and said, we're going to have to confiscate all your computers, everything, because all of that, what's the term I'm looking for? You just, basically what happened was China was sitting in their system using and trying to get information from the federal government.
It's a backdoor.
And it wasn't ever found until the federal government got a ping about it, came to them, and now this medium-sized trucking business doesn't have any of their computers, doesn't have any of their, they have to work off cash, they have to work off papers, because they've got to start from the ground up. And so that IT guy is now starting everything from the very start and trying to get everything straight. So you can, it was a Chinese, like a Chinese hacker that was pretty prolific in what he or she was doing, or they, it's a group thing, I'm sure. But so when you find it at the tail end, what we're trying to do is get it out there from the start.
Out in front.
The endpoint users is really, that's funny because everything is done by code. So you're really not going to know what to look for, because you're not setting you're not setting up the applications. You're not doing all of the testing. So, and that's really what I've learned is, where does it originate? We're never going to see that from an endpoint user. We're only going to be seeing the computer or the device that we're using. That's the endpoint user. We're not looking and beyond into the application where they can send that virus in, or they can change the code. I mean, those are things that are beyond what the average employee is going to know.
Even if you're able to look at the code,
you're not going to know
what are we looking at?
So knowing that you don't have to necessarily You just got to know on the endpoint how to be a safe user. Choosing your password is always
So let's talk about the
Oh, man.
password. I think that's something that is, it's if you can't use the same one for everything you have,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Obviously, right. But then again, right, you can't have a different one for everything you have.
Too
Many, right? But I don't know where I read this or a podcast or something, but we're gonna get away from the password.
Yeah,
It's
there's
easy.
a big movement by NIST, and I think this has been adopted, but I don't think it's been widespread yet as far as adoption by any organization as a whole. But you will not have a password anymore, but you will set one up originally, and it's basically almost like a just one step. In cybersecurity, we want to have everything layered. We talk about defense in depth. We talk about having things that are your layered defense. You don't just have one defense for a particular asset. You're going to have
Like
multiple.
multi-factor.
You're going to have the top layer, the middle layer.
You're always going to have like a physical layer. It's like, if your computer room is not going to be out, your servers are not going to be out amongst everybody else where anybody can just walk in and,
Right.
have access to it. So there's that. Then you also have other technical controls where you say, well, who has access to that? Well, do we want everybody in this office? Short answer to that is no. You need to keep that limited to maybe one or two people, depending on the size of your organization.
Right.
But even like when I worked for large companies, that control was set out to where it was like just kind of almost like it was so centralized that only a handful of people might have access to that system as far as to administer it.
Yep.
But if someone else needed to get in, they had they could go get approvals and they could get in. But so that's an administrative control that's out there and available. So that's what we always talk about in cybersecurity is set it up to where it's not just one or two things protecting that asset. It's multiple, and it's the more the better. But also, you don't want to make it so complicated that nobody will ever use it.
Yeah.
Right.
And again, going back to your password question, I know NIST has recommended doing away with passwords. I think that's going to be a hard thing to adopt as time goes on because all the major systems, and I'm talking about operating systems, including Microsoft Windows, even Macintosh, they all have a need for that. So to get to that point, it's going to probably take, I don't know time wise, but it's going to take a huge leap.
What are they saying will be the replacement of a password if you have to get into something?
You're going to
fingerprint, iris sort of thing.
Definitely, the multi-factor authentication will come more into play. So you'll have to either set up like I think I've got one here on my key chain. I had one of these for a couple of years now.
A physical.
Yeah, I've got a fob here. It's called a YubiKey. And I can plug this into a computer. I can plug it in my phone or tablet. And I can actually use my fingerprint because it's a reader on this side.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I can actually set up multiple accounts on here. I've got about banking and, I don't want my 17-year-old daughter to get a hold of my password for Amazon because then I would be broke. But just things like that to kind of protect those assets that are most critical to you that you see as what could be the most damaging thing to you, like Chris has said before. Getting back to that. So I think, you have that, still have a username. It's a must. But you could also have other, it could be a thing where you have like they email you or send you a code through text, which is also being frowned upon now. So
Really?
there's lots of changes coming our way. So I think the more like biometric capabilities, those are going to be more and more. And the thing is, they're doing better because before there was a high failure rate of some of those, especially like fingerprint readers, like on
iPads.
Yeah, and those can be. Give me 5 minutes and I can hack into your iPad.
Oh wow!
So especially if you're using a fingerprint reader.
Okay.
And there's so low tech of things that we can do because your fingerprint, the way it builds off is the oils within your skin, and then that imprint within your thumbprint. Well, there's people that are older. I'm kind of getting to that point. I think where my thumbprint's getting.
He's gonna be a printless.
Take my fingerprints, a double dare you, yeah. But as people get older, that starts to fade, and so people say, "Well, I can't get into my iPad." Well, why not? Well, I got into it a few weeks ago, but I haven't been able to get into it now.
Yeah.
Well, have you put lotion on your hands? Oh, yeah, maybe so. And I was like, well, when you first did that, that's the impression it's got. So you probably need to refresh that. So we can get in. Do you have a password? Do you have something else you can get in? Well, no, I don't. I have this, but Apple produces things out there where they kind of tell you there's ways to get into it still.
Yeah.
So I think the same thing could be said about replacing those passwords, there's going to be other things that come down the pipe. We're just not there yet.
You have your pass keys and you have certain things, but now you're using your phone. They're doing the QR codes where you got to log in and do your QR
We do a lot
code.
of that. Yeah.
But the longer the password, the safer. And there's a way of I want to say, I don't want to speak out of line here, but there's a length of time that there's an algorithm. So the longer your password, the more years it takes to hack. And so I think it's 10 to 10, upper, lowercase, numbers, symbols.
Unfortunately, there's lots of commercial software available
Yeah.
for hackers or just anybody. We can also call people that are probably less technically skilled. We call them script kiddies. But they can go out and they can just buy the software.
Yeah.
And they can actually crack your password easier.
Yeah.
I always recommend at least 15 characters,
Mm-hmm.
and that's mixed. And if you need to change it, about anywhere from 30 days is too often, but I'd say 60 days at a minimum.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then I worked for places before where they said, "Oh, you set your password." Well, we never change it. And I was like, "Well, we don't have a way to change it."
So think about that. 15 characters. How many businesses do you online? You see how quickly you got a black book,
Right.
and everything. Everything is. It's almost like you're scheduling your life around your password,
Right.
And that's the whole. I think that's what cybersecurity for some people. More than that, but I think for us today, it's
that focus in on that
absolutely.
where they, like you said, they kind of put their minds around it to where they say, "Okay, the security people are coming around because I need to change my password," and or I'm getting a message on my laptop or whatever saying I need to change my password. Well, again, fatigue comes in. So what are they going to do? They're going to go back to the one they remember the best, and they're going to change a character at the end or add a character.
So let me ask you this, and let me just add it: personal and work. Okay, you're going to get fatigued no matter where you are. So where are you going to find that balance between? Are you going to be safer with your own, or are you going to be safer with your work? So see, now people blend them.
Yeah.
So the passwords that they use at work, they're carrying them over into their personal, and what they're doing in personal, they're kind of mixing them. So it's almost like that you're setting yourself up to not really, you really don't know with it, but when they got your personal password, they got your business.
Yeah, or vice versa. But then there's the I think a lot of more people are depending on the vaults.
Right.
Yeah.
Like the LastPass, the Norton.
And I think that's the thing is those are great tools, but they shouldn't be your only tool. And again, it goes back to the thing too. If you take, for instance, Amazon or Google, if you log into them, they give you many options. Not just
strong password.
Set your password.
Yeah.
And then here's your next step. We also suggest you do these things as well.
Yeah.
You don't have to do them all.
Right.
But it's not a bad idea. Like they offer like backup codes.
Yeah.
Or recovery codes. Go ahead and do that. Go ahead and choose it. It's not going to hurt anything. Put it someplace safe because, even if someone gets your email, or I'm sorry, your user account name, they might not have that password, but maybe they do have the password. Well, they don't have something else where they can prove that it's actually you or that user. Okay, well, recovery code. Okay, those are only flashed up on the screen one time.
Yeah, you got.
And so if you get it, then you can say, "Well, I know one of my codes is this." Well, once you use it, it's done. It's used up. So I think more and more places are moving towards that and give you those options. So the more options, the better. It's almost like, again, going back to defense in depth.
Yeah.
Don't just choose one. Choose more than one.
Regulations are changing too within industries. Healthcare is getting a little bit more, finance.
Right.
I mean, they have to. I mean, they fall under federal regulations, state, local. I mean, they fall under, regulations that they have no choice but to protect the consumer.
Right.
And the consumer has no choice. If you want to use our business, or you want to come bank with us, or you want to come to our hospital, there's going to be certain protocols that these institutions and organizations are going to have to establish in order for that to be a non-risk for them. Because, Angel, I'm so sorry, but I'm calling you to tell you that your medical record, you're going to panic.
Be like, what?
Exactly. And then, and then they run the risk of being sued. So, I mean, it's, and I think that's really why I brought that first, their tension that you feel. When you go to work, you don't want to have to be under pressure, under fire, but fortunately, it's a mandatory thing that you're going to have to be accustomed to doing. Even as a small business, you should be practicing that, or even at least bringing it to the table to your employees that when they first get hired, these are the expectations. And it's not that we don't trust you. It's just we've got to protect the whole, it's not just about you.
100%. And I think, history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes really closely, right?
Love it. Yeah.
It's like every day when you get in your car, what's the first thing you do, right? You throw on your seatbelt. It's almost automatic,
Yeah.
Like, for us older folk, it's a little bit more lax on it, But
my wife, I got to tell her to put it on.
My daughter,
if I'm just going down to the store, I don't need to put that on.
Yeah.
That
mentality, right?
Man.
But my daughter, oh my gosh, I can't back out of the driveway or leave the premises before she's like, Dad, seatbelt. And now that she drives, she just won't leave until I have it on. I was like, all right.
Well, what you do in the future is you try to delay that, where you say, well, are you in a big hurry? Well, let me take it. Can I get back to the same treatment they gave you?
But the point is that generation, they grew up and it was already, no, that's what you do when you get in a car.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what but for us, it was like, I remember my grandfather was like, what? Seatbelt? We were no seatbelt. But once they made the law, right? It was hard to get that law passed, right?
It was hard for people to actually follow through and actually comply because, I was one of those too where, when I was little, I was sitting in between my grandparents in the front seat on that, the armrest.
Yeah.
No seatbelt.
Yeah.
And I guess I was just as good to go through the windshield as everybody else was. So,
But you look how it went from the driver. That was the
driver.
And then now it's the passenger. And then it's the people in the back.
That's what tripped me out. I didn't realize that was.
And you can get a ticket for anybody, as the driver. And I think that's what really makes it so prevalent is you can be an employee of mine. And then all of a sudden, everybody is being put in this position where now their jobs are at risk. Yeah. And I think that's the mindset we have to go into our job is we have to not only protect our workspace, but you also have to protect who else logs into that workspace.
Because now it's all connected.
And whether it's a big part, a small part, everybody is in it together.
Right. Hey there, bookworms and knowledge seekers. Ever wished you could find everything you need in one place? Look no further than the Ector County Library. We're not just about books, though we've got plenty of those, from the latest page-turners to classic favorites. We're talking free high-speed internet, tech classes to boost your skills, and awesome programs for all ages. Kids can dive into storytime adventures, teens can hang out and study, and adults can join book clubs or learn something new. There's always something exciting happening at the library. So whether you're a student looking for homework help, a job seeker needing resources, or just someone who loves to learn, we've got you covered. Swing by your local Ector County Library and see what we're all about. It's more than just books. It's a whole world of possibilities. Ector County Library. Your adventure starts here.
The BAM BizTalk podcast is brought to you by our sponsor, Pachuco's Restaurant. Craving authentic and eclectic cuisine in Midland? Well, Pachuco's has you covered. Located in downtown Midland at the ever so legendary and iconic historic building at 316 North Big Spring Street, Pachuco's blends rich and unique flavors in a conveniently pleasant and vibrant atmosphere. Enjoy the highest quality barbecue, savory tacos, burgers, and a variety of other mouth-watering dishes that reflect the spirit of a true Pachuco cuisine. Real, authentic, and just plain different. Check out their menu at www.pachucos432.com or call 432-218-8806 to inquire, or better yet, just show up and get your shine on. At Pachucos, where heritage, exquisite taste, and hospitality come together for an unforgettable dining experience. Pachucos, Midland, Texas. Now back to the show.
And I think that's really what this company is about is, our core capabilities are everything, and it's the governance, it's the vulnerability, it's the managing, it does everything. So you may have one component in place. You may have your assets and everything in check, but beyond that, what are you doing to assess that risk? And so that's really kind of what I like about this is, man, it's all about everything. You're not just saying, okay, that's good, we're going to check that off of it. The checklist is very prevalent. And we want to make sure that as a company, at least, this instillment of what we're doing is, as a business representative, I want to make sure that they understand we're not just going to protect you from this particular, user. We're going to protect you from the governance processes to make sure that everybody can be comfortable with how the business and the policies and procedures and, the risk assessments are being done. And it's not, like you were saying, it's not about the attacking people. It's about letting people get a good understanding that, hey,
Right.
everybody has to be involved in this. So, and it's unfortunate that we've gotten to that point, but criminals don't care.
They don't care.
They don't
No.
care. They do not care
No.
about you having to feed
Yeah.
5-6 miles at home. They don't care.
It's a lot like, weapons in general,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And in law enforcement, right? Because originally law enforcement didn't have weapons, right? But then when the criminals started having weapons, well, okay, law enforcement has weapons. No, criminals got bigger weapons. Okay, well, law enforcement got big. Now law enforcement got tanks, and they're fully suited out.
Yeah.
Because they have to be, right?
Yeah.
Because, right.
Baton don't work.
It's not going to work. Yeah. Because criminals don't care, right? Absolutely. They're just in it to get what they need to get,
Yeah.
right? Regardless of the consequences. And I think that we need to really be aware of that, right? Because you talk to a law enforcement officer, right? They see the worst of the worst every day, right? It's just, it's really, it's a lot that they deal with, and they see the worst of us, right, on a constant basis. Yeah. So they know that the threat's out there, right? So they protect their homes like nobody else. They protect because they know what's out there. So
They want to come back home.
Well, yeah. And it's
for
kind of
sure.
kind of goes back to the saying too. I think back to the line in The Untouchables, the movie from '87, where Sean Connery says, you learn the first lesson of law enforcement, which is you go home at the end of the day or at the end of your shift, which that's true. That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so if you tie that into cybersecurity, it's like our whole goal is just to protect your liability.
Right.
And I think back to that too. I have a coworker that I've worked with for a number of years, and we still stay in touch. And he said it very wisely one day. He said, "Our job, no matter what you do in this office," he said, "our job is to protect his liability," meaning the bosses. Yeah. And so that takes on a lot more personal weight than that you say, "Gosh, what am I doing that maybe threatens that liability?"
Yeah.
And so if you're thinking in those terms, it's a whole lot easier to say, "Okay, I'll type in this 15 character password, or I'll use this biometric, device to get into my laptop, or go, whatever."
Right.
You're more willing to do that then if
100%.
you put that back on yourself.
Right. Take on the responsibility, like a pilot. Right. They go through this extensive checklist. Check every single
flight, whether it's 4 hours or an hour and a half.
Matter. Right. You're checking every little detail. Oh, wait, there's a flat. No, we can't take off. Right. Got to get that fixed first. Right. Everything. Right. It's meticulous, redundancy. So I think that's what's needed, right, in a certain aspect. But what's palpable to
and every person is going to have their opinion on why they're doing this, and they're always going to have because I'm human. I work in multiple industries, and I see where if you don't have enough, how it impacts. If you don't have this, how it's going to delay, or there's always a opportunity or a vulnerability. And vulnerability is one of those words that we use all the time because we use it as a weakness. Vulnerability is just a weakness in a system, whether it's a supply chain system, whether it's physical. Do you have enough manpower? If you don't, then that's a weakness because then you can't get the supplies where they need to be. It's no different than what we do in an everyday life. Think about how many times you go through your routine at home. You wake up at a certain time, depending on the type A or type B, but you have a process, and it may not be everybody else's process, but it's your process. And I think that's what we are here to say is check your process. What is the process that needs to be, updated? What are the things that you need to be a little bit more consistent and concerned about? Because consistency is really where you're going to be rewarded, because the more consistent you are with changing your password, doing those things, that's going to bring that comfort level of, my liability is no longer at risk as much as I thought it was when I started, implementing certain things. But that's technology. It's never going to change.
And you have to ask, when you're kind of go back to the foundation, you ask that person, the business owner, or whoever is the most critical role, what keeps you awake at night?
Yeah.
That's when you
Yeah.
pose that question. If they don't just give like a regurgitation of everything on their mind, then it's a bigger red flag to me, because it's like, you haven't even thought about this.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
Right.
is there something about, the same boss as years ago? He said to us one time, he said, I don't care what you do. Just keep me off the 10 o'clock news. Keep my name off the 10 o'clock news.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
I've heard that before.
yeah, I mean, you go back to the whole thing too. What can I do to make sure my boss is not on the 10 o'clock news?
Mm-hmm.
And, whether you work for a small business, you work for a large corporation, it doesn't matter. If your whole thing is to, again, protect that liability of that boss or that employer, what are the things I can do personally? And again, it comes back to the self-responsibility, like you said, Angel. I mean, that's crucial.
Mm-hmm.
That is absolutely crucial.
Yeah.
It gives you a sense of when you go home, you did a better job today than you did yesterday. And I think that mindset, that ethical mindset of being an employee or an employer, is you want to have that morale or that ethical understanding that, hey, we have to do things that sometimes we may not agree with, we may not feel comfortable doing, but in the end, you've just protected 165 employees. You've just protected 10 of the employees. And you look at it now at a sense of they can go home just the same way as I can,
Right.
and I think that at the end of the day, you want people to feel like when they come to work, that the environment is going to be an environment where everybody is doing their part. You just are not hovering to make sure that, hey, are you,
Right.
you want to know that when that door's closed, that everybody's doing what they need to be doing out there, so cybersecurity is one of those that it's everybody's workspace. I mean, it is. I mean, because people are going to be on their phones, people are going to be on their tablets, on their laptops, and there's going to be different risk. The severity scores on these risks. You want to protect your server. That's the risk that you have. That's a critical risk versus your workstation. Then you weigh the options. So, that really goes to say those people that are in the a little bit more critical. I mean, those are the ones that you really want to make sure that they have what they need. I mean, every day they're putting the business on the line by logging into a critical, application that could just falter the entire business or change operations. And operations, if it's not operating, then your business
Or
is not.
another thing too is along with that is maybe it's not that, but maybe it's a mistake they make from the error standpoint,
Yeah.
where they make a mistake where maybe they're shipping out instead of 1,000, it's supposed to be 10,000 units or something, or vice versa, and before you know it, okay, that you have these things in the background that have to operate and have to come back to square one to say, okay, well, we need. It was supposed to be 10,000. We need 9,000. Or the other side of that is you say, gosh, you sent us 9,000 extra. How do we get this back to you?
Yeah.
And, and then it costs money. It takes time. It takes effort.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, et cetera.
That happened to me.
Yeah. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, I think you have to think about it in those terms too of what are the repercussions
Mm-hmm.
if I do this?
Mm.
So if I click on this link, or maybe if I don't choose a better password, or maybe from the administrator standpoint in IT to say, well, we set the password policy.
Yeah.
Maybe your password policy needs to be updated.
Right.
Maybe that's the thing is you say, well, what's the biggest risk? Well, we have passwords that are 4 characters long. Okay. A computer, I mean, my daughter's first laptop I gave her could crack that in a matter of minutes. So just be honest here. Let's, take care of everything back, set policy, again, governance, risk, and those kinds of things are more critical, for people to think about than just worrying about, again, it goes back to protecting the liability of that business.
As an individual, you're not going to be perfect. And we're not designed humans are not designed to be perfect, but humans are designed to be compassionate. Humans are designed to use what God gave them above their shoulders. Really and truly, that's what gets everybody into that. Man, if I could only, because there are things in my path and journey to where I'm at now. If I knew then what I know now, that's everybody's, that's our reminisce. Man, if I knew then, but I think right now is not what it was when we were back then. Phones weren't as complicated. We had the flip phones, we had the pagers, so we fall, and I'm speaking, y'all may be a lot younger than I am, but I was in that generation where 40 hours meant something to somebody. And when you went to work for that somebody, it was the reputation that you were leaving them with as an individual. And I think we fall into that. We have to, the old school in us, has to meet the new school. Because
Yeah.
there's some people that are old school that, man, that new school, they're just like this and they don't understand what's going on. And
Yeah.
my father-in-law is he's a very old school, and I work with him a lot of these things. Garage door opener. I mean, you can't have your garage door isn't now on your phone, whereas before, old school, you
had
were
to
lifting it on yourself, and now you had a passcode. So these things like that, and it can see his frustration and the understanding of, well, I did this and I did that, but I could only imagine being, and my father-in-law is in his late 70s. That's a frustrating position to be in.
Yeah.
When you didn't have that in your school and you didn't have that opportunity to learn those.
Right.
So I'm patience with him. It's no different than when I'm patient with students or when I'm patient with somebody that may not be as fluent as me. You got to step back and you got to get them comfortable with what
What's
you're
their
asking them to
perspective?
do. Yeah, absolutely.
100%. My grandmother, she's 96. She's turning 97 this
Love
year,
it.
right?
Love it.
She gets her mail, right? She'll sit there and she'll tear off her information, right?
Yeah.
And she shreds it, right? Like for all of her mail.
You got that little corner.
Yeah. Yeah. She tears it off.
I
right?
love it. I love it.
And then she flushes it down the toilet, right? And
I thought you were going to say she takes it in the backyard and burns it.
that's probably one.
I'm sure she'd love to, but it's that mentality, right? Because back in the day, your information was stolen from your dumpster.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it still is. I mean, you'll be amazed, like, all these different entities and organizations that start up business to go shred people's, business records.
Yeah.
Because
That's what
lucrative. It's lucrative.
And lawyers were also going and finding ways to find evidence on stealing their trash.
Because they were sending PIs to go out and go, dig through people's trash.
Yeah.
Or, sit and, observe, and record.
Grandma was on point,
Right.
ripping it off.
Yeah.
Her was in the right mindset.
See, and I kind of go back to my grandparents because after they both passed away back in the early 2000s, after my grandfather did, my mom and my aunt went through their house to try to, determine what to do and all. Well, my grandparents maintained all their tax records going back to the 1930s.
Wow.
And all that was stored at the house.
Wow.
And so,
yeah,
I was like, they wouldn't have trusted that to put that in the, put that in the trash or anything like that. They wouldn't have done that. They would have, I could picture my grandfather saying, well, we need to get rid of some of this. Let's go take it out and incinerate it.
Yeah.
Since the 1930s, man.
And it was wild because, when my mom told me that, I was like going, no way. She goes, yeah. She said, we found tax records go back to the 30s. I'm like going, I was like, well, I said, well, what did y'all do? She said, we're taking it out to incinerate it. She said, there's boxes of.
But that's that.
Yeah, like you said,
comfort level.
Your grandma's tearing off the corner. She's doing what she's supposed to do. She's shredding. She's flushing it down the commode. Whatever else she's doing to protect herself. And so that is one of those things that, crosses generations. So
that's a physical security.
Right. That's the physical
Now
side.
you get into digital cybersecurity where now grandma tearing it off. Well, I'm sorry, grandma, but that's digitally somewhere.
Right.
And that's the reality of it.
Right. And that's the thing. I don't think she understands that her information is online somewhere.
But let her have that moment of thinking.
Right. Yeah. No, I don't hound on her. No. I just think it's it's interesting because she is protected. It's that fundamental, right? The foundation of where we're at now. It goes from the physical to the digital world where we're living in.
Kind of like we were mentioning earlier about the cops. I mean, the last place you want to break into is a police officer's house.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, even the criminals know better than that. But you go back to the thing too. The reason why is because of what they've seen, their experiences, what they've encountered. They know, okay, well, I need to go reinforce that front door, especially when I'm not here, or I need to replace the hinges, or I need to put longer screws, or whatever they're doing to harden that environment for themselves and their families.
I look at it.
And the same thing could be said about systems. What can we do to harden those systems and harden those processes to protect the data? The data is the most important thing, not the server itself. It's the data. And then beyond that is, what is that data responsible for? Is it got patient records on it? Does it have financial records on it? Because then it impacts people.
It's a good point.
And that's the bottom line is,
very good point.
You're trying to protect those people.
Yeah,
right.
Good point.
Right. And you guys, you deal with a lot of, you see the aftermath, right? You see, like, if once the cop shows up to a house where the door was kicked in, okay, I better reinforce my front door, right? My windows. Where you guys see the aftermath of what happens when somebody gets hacked, right? And stolen. You were saying earlier that average is 200,000 ask for a hack.
200 G's, yeah.
And that's an average, and that's probably on the low end
It
now.
is, yeah, it is. So-
Because you think about like some of these hacks in recent times, like I'll just use the example of what happened with the Health Sciences Center at Texas Tech, both in Lubbock and El Paso. The estimates are already in the millions.
Yeah.
And they don't even know for sure yet because they're still they're paying in claims because
Wow.
that's so recent.
Do they know how they were hacked?
I've heard different stories. I haven't seen anything finalized, but I think there wasn't just one, there was multiple.
Multiple, huh?
Again, my understanding too is they have a cybersecurity team, and the Texas Tech system has it.
Yeah.
And there's some people that I've heard different sources say that some people lost their jobs. So, it is a thing, a matter of have due diligence, make sure you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, and have the due care behind it, that supports all that, because I don't think people think in those terms sometimes.
So you mentioned there's multiple attacks. Is this like different bad actors at the same time, or is this like a coordinated where one bad actor is having a multiple,
Well, and the thing is, threat actors don't usually operate just in ones and twos. The ones that are really good, they do.
Yep.
But if you see, like, if you pull up the most recent FBI, wanted list, or they add to it or whatever, and they add these, 12 Russian hackers. Well, it's not because they all individually did 12 attacks. It's because they probably worked in coordination, in concert for multiple attacks.
It's almost
So,
like it's a working team.
Right.
I mean, some people are better at certain things than the other one, and so they use them. It's like in the movies. You see it in the movies all the
Ocean's
time.
11,
You got to
the
have somebody.
hackers.
Yeah, exactly. You got to have somebody that's good at cracking the safe versus somebody that's good at logistically planning it.
Right.
So it's when you think about it, and I was going to go back to this point too. One of the things that I found when I was on social media was very to care less about what I was typing because I wasn't physically going to see that person. That's how they think.
Yeah.
They think I could care less because I will never see you because I live on the other side of the United States, or I have nothing to do with you. So it's easy to attack somebody, which is a cowardly way of criminal. Of just looking at it as you're thinking you have somebody that probably has zero social skills. You probably have somebody that doesn't really that physical surrounding, but they're okay with attacking somebody in that fashion. Me, that's what I like. Personally, I just think that type of me is what I want to take down. Is you're attacking somebody that has been working 40 years and now their pension is no longer there, or now they have to go through a legal process,
or they have to go back to work.
Yeah,
Their pension was completely wiped out, and now they're having to work at Walmart or something. Or not that that's a bad thing; that's a very honorable thing because they're taking care of business.
Yeah.
Do what they got to do. Yeah.
But
now they have to make a decision.
But they have to do
put
those
themselves
things
back in the workforce.
exactly. And
Yeah.
I think the thing is, like you said, I take it personally when I hear about people being hacked.
Oh, I do.
And
too.
because
man,
and I say one time, and I think. And maybe originally I didn't think this in these terms because I think I thought the opposite. But when I hear about people at places getting hacked, I kind of used to think, well, what are their defenses? What did they not do? What were their, what happened? What were their limitations that they couldn't actually follow through? Now I'm more like, gosh, I feel sorry for them.
Yeah.
I feel empathy for them and sympathy for them because I've seen it. I've had it. Like say going out and doing instant response for ransomware attacks. I've been in offices before in locations where, again, people are very willing to cooperate. I've been in those where unwilling to cooperate.
Yeah.
And both times or both situations where you're sitting there saying, okay, I need X, Y, and Z from you. Okay, the cooperative people will get that for you before you sit back down.
Yeah.
Whereas the uncooperative people say, well, I think we need to get a court order for that. And we're like going, okay, you take the time to do that. And while your network,
Yeah.
because we're going to have to take it down because we don't know what else it might affect. And, when you start talking to the things that they understand better, and those terms they understand better, they say, well, okay, I'll get number one for you before you sit back down. And I think that's the crucial thing that people need to take away is that, again, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Again, not to scare people, but to say, you need to always be thinking about this in the back of your mind. How are my actions or inactions contributing to protecting the liability of my employer or my business? Because it could be, it could be just as guilty as somebody on the front line.
Yeah.
And you could have one IT person, you could have 100 IT people. But a lot of times, I think that's kind of what we're circling around to is that we can outside source like us to kind of come in and say, hey, let's just do a penetration test, pen test system, see if you have any thing that isn't quite working, isn't quite right. And then we, as Tall City Cyber, we can come in and, as we said, ease your frustration, give you peace of mind, because there's different options as a business person or as a person you can do to really protect yourself.
And I think another thing to think about too is it's not just a one and done type situation. It's we want to develop
Yeah.
a relationship,
Mhm.
rapport with you
Good
to
point.
say,
Yeah.
don't just call us for this one penetration test, once a year.
Yeah.
Let us and help, help team. If you have a team, or if you don't have a team, let's come in and help you try to shore up your defenses as possible.
Yeah.
And give you some guidance on things that maybe you haven't thought of, because your business is your whatever over here. Let's let you do the widget creation and let us help you shore those defenses up.
Yeah.
So
I think it too. It takes people from, and I'm going to use you as an example. You can tell us everything that happens on the inside of your walls.
Yeah.
We get you to think outside of your walls. We get you to think when you hit send, it doesn't stay within your walls. It goes somewhere else in a digital form. Or when you're saving something or you're asking somebody to come in, you want to be able to know what to ask for. You don't know what you don't know. And I think that if you have that ability for your knowledge to grow, then now you're starting to take yourself outside of the box. You're starting to think, okay, this is why I do have to be careful. Or you may do businesses, people do business with Odessa College all the time.
Mhm.
And what happened to them?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So does it a lack of trust because we've gotten and it doesn't. They're an educational institution that happens to have, the protected information of students that, they're doing their best. And I think that it's just that understanding that it doesn't make a company any less better if they are getting hacked, or somebody like Odessa College or, Texas Tech. They're just as vulnerable as anybody else.
well, that's what it shows, is that it doesn't. Again, it goes back to the concept of
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
Yeah.
And so I think, like, going back to the mentality of saying, we're going to help you think beyond your borders, beyond your walls, to think more outside the box, to say what is possible, what's, what are the repercussions.
Yeah.
Again, if you walk in and say, we don't have any policies, well, that's easy. We can sit down in the space of a day
Mhm.
and at least get you going and get thinking that mindset.
Remote work I would have never thought that remote work would have been the prevalence, of course, during COVID, because we really weren't set up for the pandemic. We did more often what we thought, hindsight.
Right.
But at the same time, you didn't stockpile, things that had an expiration date. You can't stockpile things that have an expiration date, because what are you wasting money? Or so there's a lot of things that cybersecurity attacks can teach businesses. First of all, it teaches you how to better budget for a cost, an annual or monthly cost. I think that's really what, cybersecurity, in terms of, we look at it as an insurance. You have to budget for your health insurance. You have to budget for your car insurance. And I think businesses need to start looking at that.
Right.
So, even though we know what you're going to buy, our business is one of those businesses that can come in and say, okay, well, we don't want to overspend, because you may not ever have that. Your risk of spending $100,000 on this for something that may only cost you $56,000, is that a good ROI? No, it's not. So, and I think really what the pandemic taught us was, man, the left and the right glove had a higher cost than what they did before. And going back to, the overspending, I had one wrong number, and I had 100 boxes of these gloves and I was thinking, why in the world did I order that much? And going back, it was just, I couldn't even, if I hit it or what happened. So it's little things like that. I mean, and it's just the mindset of better off knowing that you have somebody on your side that say, oh, it's okay, we got you, versus not knowing who to turn to when the crisis is happening.
Right.
Like the analogy, I guess, to insurance is like, you're buying pieces.
That's what they tell you, right?
Right. Like, okay, if I can implement these things, except I guess the difference would be is insurance after the fact.
Exactly.
Right. And
Yeah.
we're trying to go preventative measures. So take that preventative as your investment into your peace of mind.
Yeah.
Well, and it's also, it's ongoing. It's not a matter of just saying just this one and done type of situation. You're talking about creating this mentality of saying, let's maintain this relationship. And, if people ask, is Tall City Cyber willing to put us on a retainer? The short answer to that is, because it's a thing where something came along, something happened, and you know, okay, we can call Tall City Cyber and they're going to send somebody out. They're going to take care of this. And that's to have that kind of rapport with people to say, oh, I know we can reach out to Tall City Cyber and they're going to send somebody out. And they know that, okay, they're going to take care of business for us. And yet we need to like maintain that relationship to say, well, who can we call? Or they may say, is this in y'all's wheelhouse? And we'll be honest with them and say, no, it's really not. Or we can find somebody that can help you.
Yeah.
And so, I think that's the main thing is like, what we've kind of talked about before is cybersecurity is so large and it's hard to really, unless you specialize in one or two things, it's hard to be a free agent. I mean, like I'll admit my problem is application security and coding and secure coding. Might as well be speaking Greek to me.
Yeah. Same here.
Now I could, if someone said to me, can you review my code for me? Yeah, I'll do that all day. I can tell you where there's might be a problem, but I'm not going to be able to sit there and look at it and say, oh yeah, you don't want to do this or whatever. I'll just say, well, you got some issues here. Now, is it stamp of approval? No, because I would never say, yeah, take and run with that. I would, but then there's some other things too that people will ask me about, like ransomware. Now, am I an expert? I don't consider myself an expert, but I have seen a lot. And my experience has said, here's some things, here's some lessons learned from the past.
Yeah.
And that's how you say, don't do X, Y, and Z. Do A, B, and C. And that way they understand that better. And I think the main thing is that people need to understand is, again, cybersecurity is broad. It's all business operations. It's not just one in itself. It's not a vacuum. It has to be treated across the entire organization. So that's
Definitely,
I think the thing that people need to have that mindset of, the cybersecurity team, well, they just come around and make sure we're changing our passwords. Please don't look at it that way. Please think a little bit more beyond that.
Yeah, take some agency in it, right? Ownership. You mentioned if you can't help them out, you can recommend somebody. So what kinds of businesses, what size businesses do you guys who's your customer, I guess?
I think the main, and I think Gina would want us to respond this way, is that there's no limitations.
There's a need.
There's, if there's a need and you want to talk, feel free to contact us. We'll be happy to talk to you. And again, if it comes back to like what Eric Waller said earlier about what would be the first step, maybe that's what they need, but maybe they just need something. They just need maybe some rest assurance that, okay, you're doing the right things. You've got some policies here in place already, but you could actually make them better if you did, make a couple of tweaks here and there. Maybe that's what they need to hear from somebody that's outside their normal business realm.
For sure. Somebody with an outside perspective who's an expert in it, right? And that's what we're looking for. And how about, if, like say, we're a solo operator, right? We're doing everything on our own. We have, everything's contained, right? One email, right? One computer, but hey, I need, right? That's when you're introducing
Roles.
the most, right?
Yeah, you're role based now.
Because you have more risk
Right.
now, right? And like, that's something you guys could help consult the growth of a company.
Cybersecurity training is where it starts, because you have to know what assets you have. We have to know what you consider your critical components within your business that Eric had alluded to in the GRC, which is the governance, risk, and compliance. We need to know what's important to you so that we can see the assets are going to keep your business running, or how to, detect vulnerabilities. And because not every vulnerability could be a person. That you hired just isn't as skilled in certain things, that maybe that's where the consulting and training happens. And it's not that you are going to be able to reflect or, give them that understanding. And it's just you have within your walls, and how we as a company can protect it for you, but you're right. Growth is what you want as a business owner.
For sure. That's the goal, right?
Yeah.
You want to, and you don't want to have, you don't be hindered, right? When you're growing, you only want to be hindered by, you are your own limitation, right? You don't want to be hindered by outside forces. But when you say assets, are you mean like each, like computer, each pad,
anything that would tangible or intangible? Because your assets could be your network, your software.
Well, and it could be also where your, intellectual property.
Yeah.
Like if you're like in your case, some of the things that your know-how and all that you probably recorded somewhere, but you don't want just the average bear out there on the street to get.
Right.
So do you treat that more with a little bit more security than you would
a tangible,
like
right?
a calculator or
Yeah.
something like that. Probably short answer to that is no. You're gonna with a higher regard.
Mm-hmm.
So that risk of that getting out there is more impactful to you as a business, and that's how you have to look at it. What's the most business impacting thing,
Mm-hmm.
and if it's a process even in your office, maybe you need to say what are the possible vulnerabilities tied to that process.
Yeah.
Mm.
And the
Okay.
people, I mean, your people are assets.
Right.
I mean, when you're just not looking at, you're looking at people and what they can bring to your business. And not everybody comes into the business prepared to do the roles that they probably didn't train for, or they did not expect, or you didn't expect them to kind of fall into that. So that really, I think that's what I like about this team here is everybody that we have brings something that you can grasp onto, and you can be like, wow, now that makes a lot more sense. Now that I can understand why this guy to my left does what he does and this guy to my right does what he does, and I'm this person in the middle that we all complement. I mean, every business has that. I mean, you don't have that one person that can just do everything, and
Oh, for sure.
you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
you kind of have to give that delegation responsibility, but at the same time, you got to know how to protect that
sure.
delegated responsibility.
For sure.
So,
and just speaking of your city cyber here, I have a good relationship with Gina, the owner, and man, she's amazing, and she has always spoken very highly of her team, and I can see why. You guys are knowledgeable and thoughtful, and you're doing your best because you're helping somebody, right? And that's very much in line with who I believe Gina is as a person, and why I hold her in such high regard. And I can see that in you guys that you also hold her in such high regard because
she pays us.
Well, and I told her one
No.
time we always have like a weekly meeting with her one-on-one.
Yeah.
I told her, I think the first one, she said, was it that did you see about me? And I said, well, I think you got the 3Ds. And she said, what are the 3Ds? I said, well, dedicated, disciplined, and determined.
Mm.
And I said, that's the secret to all this is that you have the drive, you have all these things that are necessary, and it's undeniable. People can, listen to you for 5 minutes. They can,
Yeah.
And I think just based on her experience, her military experience, her experience, in working with Fortune 500 companies,
Yeah.
she has that. It's just very indistinguishable from, the mindset of having those 3Ds. I think it's important. I think any leader, any business leader, and she doesn't. I told somebody last night. We're standing. I said, well, y'all work together? And I said, yeah. I said, I work for her. She said, well, no, we kind of work together. And I was like going, no, I work for you. I mean, it's not to be a thing but it's just to show that, she's definitely in charge. She knows what she's doing.
Mm-hmm.
And like I say, after 5 minutes of talking to her, you realize that.
Mm-hmm.
And she knows what she's talking about. So,
And she that's another, the pats on the back.
Mm-hmm.
We all have, that we got to about that as a team. We have to pat ourselves on the back when we do something that helps our team. And she, that's what I enjoy as a leader, because I was in healthcare for a long time, and I was that. I'm never gonna give somebody the lack of light when I know that they were the ones that made that, and I think really why I enjoy this team is, when he does something that compliments us, I would hope that he would pat himself on the back because he just improved us better. And that's what this core team does is, if I'm grants, or if I'm looking at, things that I know are going to impact all of us and the amount of that we have on our table, I'm definitely going to be like, Chris, you did it today, buddy. You and I think that's what we want. And that's the type of environment that you have to have, is that when you do a good job, pat yourself on the back, and, know that not only you're just going to be patting yourself, but everybody else is going to be wanting that as well. So it's definitely something you haven't, some of us they get lost. They get lost in certain processes, and they get lost in certain things. And with cybersecurity, man, you can't get lost. You have to be on the forefront. If you're lost within what you do, then you're losing, your clients are losing. And I think what I've gotten from Gina is she's just always about the client. She's always about how we can make them better, to want that relationship with us. And to me, that's what the world is lacking right now, is the sense that we're going to be there for one another. There are good things that happen, and especially in this basin where it's the energy hub.
Mm-hmm.
Energy hub is, what is it that sets us apart in the Permian Basin? The fact that we can drill, and we are experts at doing it, and we do it with such the mindset that we're going to be around for, this type of is going to be around for a long time. And, as that's the case, we want to be the same.
And and it kind of goes back to the thing too, drawn in, like say, the oil business. I mean, they've worked into an art form.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Again, it kind of goes back to the whole thing too of they know exactly what they're doing. They know how to do it in their sleep. And I think the goal is for Tall City Cyber, it's kind of be the same thing to where not necessarily we're going to do it in our sleep, but I mean, because that's how when you wake up in a cold sweat. But anyway, you wake up and you realize, there's something here that's heavily not just, that entity, because then what are they going to do? Maybe it was attacked. We go in and help.
Yeah.
We help get them back to square one and make them whole again. And then they say, well, we reached out to Tall City Cyber and they did this for us. And they could be talking to somebody in another state.
Yeah.
And before you know it, someone from Pennsylvania calling Tall City Cyber to say, hey, we're friends with so-and-so. They told us what y'all, could y'all talk to us? That's ideal. That would be an ideal situation.
For sure. But for here in the area, oil and gas industry is extremely innovative when it comes to oil and gas technology and pushing innovation forward. Now we're also the largest space industry in the nation.
That's Gina's baby right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so in an AI, the data centers, once we figure out the energy issue here, as far as powering those data centers, we got plenty of space for them.
Yeah.
So this area is going to be a place where those centers will be established.
It's going to drive in more.
It's coming in more, right? The oil and gas is going to stay relevant, right?
Yeah.
It's going to continue to be strong and grow.
And if you think about it, that's where a lot of the possible capital could come from for future
New
endeavors for other
businesses,
things, other, like again, space, you said the data centers, whatever else. That's where your capital comes from. And, all it takes is for, again, one situation to be where someone realizes, okay, this needs to be more on the forefront of our minds.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
right. And that time is coming, when everything's converging. It's a perfect storm of oil and gas being strong, the space industry really, really coming out. Emerging technologies here. Well, I mean, you guys, what you do, it's in the middle of all of that, right? And there's the kinds of vulnerabilities, which you were saying earlier. So I think we get in front of it, learn how to put on our seatbelts. I think better it will be for the whole. Right. But man, I've enjoyed this conversation. Y'all guys have like last parting words that you want.
I'll just say let City Cyber help you. Ease the frustration, and as you mentioned, just give you better peace of mind. I mean, so you don't have to worry about these threats and possibilities, and just help us, help take me.
It's to me, it's the business of of this, but there's also, I want to come from the personal side. If we, not as a business, but we see you as that relationship, then it goes beyond the business aspect. And I think that's what sets you apart is, we have a service, we have opportunity to help the side of you, but at the same time we're human just the same as they are, and I'd like to kind of have that understanding that we wake up just the same as everybody else, and our whole opportunity is designed to be about people. And I think what I don't want to get lost is, we're good at what we do, and we're that expands and grows, and just like every business, but we also want to make sure that when we see you in HEB, or we see you out in, a family, eating, that we're trying to help people at the end.
Gotcha.
Well, I think it goes back to the kind of almost being a broken record of, it's not right if, it's when. And I think people, again, changing the mindset in that direction, I think is crucial. And it doesn't matter if your organization. I think another thing to think about is, like you said a while ago, things are changing at such a rapid pace. It is hard to keep up with. And so even if you do have a dedicated team, they might need an outside perspective. Yeah. And I think it goes back to the thing too of there's lots of things we can do. We can help. So consider us helping you out.
So if somebody was interested, how would they get a hold of y'all?
website.
All
We
right.
got Tall City, Tall City.
allcitycyber.com.
Dot .com. So our website, we are on LinkedIn. Gina's a
working on that.
very social media. She's got all, and then we if you've got a hiring event, there's also, you'll find us at hiring events. We do the mixer, so we're all there's ways our social media. Like I said, I'm not on social media, so I have myself from all of the social media. So maybe you guys, other than LinkedIn, that's probably the only thing I have. So Facebook and all that good stuff.
Okay.
Whatever. Like I say, reach us through the website. There's a way that you can say book consultation.
Yeah.
And I think that probably goes to Gina,
Yeah.
and she can probably dole those out as they come in.
10-4. Well, I sure do. You guys coming on talking
Thank you.
cybersecurity and getting some awareness out there, because I think it is that. Of course, cybersecurity has been around, right, for a couple years.
Good, actually.
But now it is now to where we need to start paying attention to this because it is affecting lives, right? It's affecting people, it's affecting institutions, which affects people and their families and their lives, and they're up there that everybody hears. Everybody hears these horror stories of identity being stolen, money being taken from the bank accounts, credit cards, and list goes on and on and on and on. So as we go on and you guys keep doing what you're doing and getting an awareness, and little by little we'll learn, right? So I think that's the point to all of this. So thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
And
Thank you, Angel, for the opportunity.
Always
absolutely.
a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having
Always a pleasure, my
man.
brother. Yeah,
Always
for
a
sure,
pleasure.
for sure. All right, well, you guys take care.
Yes, sir.
All right, and Miss Gina, we love you. Thank you for doing what you do. All right.
Take care.